attendance. So if you can do that, that will be helpful. And then if you notice anything that needs to be updated on that, please make those changes if you can. Also, just a reminder really quickly that we need nominations still for vice chair, for the policy chair, and the public relations chair. So please get those in as soon as possible. That would be really great if you could do that sooner than later. And then also, we need more volunteers for Bryce, and we're crossing our fingers that we'll be able to do the Bryce Summit next summer. So also, I just want to encourage everyone to schedule meetings with your policymakers. I know that Capitol Hill might look different this year. So if you can start now, just building those relationships and maybe not talking about issues, but just being able to build some relationships with the policymakers, that would be really great. And we are really excited to have Ashley come and hop on and talk about the SHARP survey. We'll be doing the 2021 SHARPs in the spring. And I know that, like most of us, we've had challenges sometimes getting buy-in from parents and from administrators for SHARPs. And so Ashley's going to talk to us about how to overcome some of those challenges and how to get some buy-in. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and I'll mute myself.
Hi, everyone. Like Teresa said, my name is Ashley Heaton. Most of you probably know me, but those who don't, I am a prevention specialist in Kane County and also the coordinator of the Kane Community Coalition. I've been in prevention now for, I think, 8 years, just barely. So I've had to deal with quite a few things, and SHARPs is definitely one big one on my list, and something that we've had to get very creative about. So what I'm going to do is really just tell you guys my story and how we were able to overcome some of our barriers and deal with some of our issues. So just a little bit of background. The SHARP survey was conducted in Kane County, for 10 plus years without any issues. When I started this job, I didn't really have to worry about the SHARP survey being done. It was just always done. And the schools had done most of the work, if not all the work, actually, and I didn't really have to worry about it. All I did was ask the superintendent for the data when it came out every year, and it was great, and it was all done. But in 2017, our new superintendent started to voice some concerns. And so we met with him. I actually had contacted Logan Reed, my boss, and him and I went and met with our superintendent to address some of those concerns. And at that point, it was close to the time that it needed to be done. And he agreed that if the principals agreed to have us in the schools and doing it, then he would be okay with us going through with it. And so we did end up going through with it in 2017, but the participation numbers were so low that we ended up having to do like a makeup survey in 2018. And I'll talk more about these things. And then in 2019, our superintendent and our school board announced that they did not want the survey to be conducted. And that's kind of where our struggles began. So some of the steps that we've taken, I'm going to talk about each one of these, is we had numerous meetings with the superintendent, principal, school board, gathering permission forms, and then actually administering the survey. So what were the superintendent's concerns? His main one was, what's in it for us? And this is something I think that prevention specialists and us that work with coalitions kind of take for granted. Every year we get that survey and we think, oh yay, we have this data, but never do we think, do we need to show the schools what's in it for them? We know we're doing a lot of things for the schools, and we know that we're doing a lot of things for our community, but do they actually know that the SHARP survey is linked to that? So explaining to them why the SHARP survey is important and what is really in it for them. What kind of funding are we getting that we're turning around and using on them. You know, does this SHARP survey help us get our funding? And those are all questions those were all answers that we brought to him. So we were able to show him a line of funding that was approved, or a line of funding or grants that were received because of data from the SHARP survey. The next issue for him was validity. So he was worried, you know, how valid is this survey anyways? And are these kids even telling the truth? Are they, you know, just joking around and marking whatever they want? And so we went through, and you can get all of this information from Marriott Bach Harrison or anyone there. You can go, and even on their website, you can go and they will, they have a little tab that talks about their validity. So we were able to get all of the things that the SHARP, that Bach Harrison does to prove validity. And we brought that up to him, showing him that there are validity checks, numerous ones, not just one. And his other issue with validity was, are we getting enough participation? And he felt that with the low numbers that we were getting, that it really wasn't a true representation of our school. So that was another thing we needed to address, was how do we get our numbers up? How do we prove to him that it is a good representation of our schools? The next concern, of course, was privacy. So as we also got information from Bach Harrison about how do we keep privacy, making sure that students are sitting far enough away from each other, making sure that when they did do paper surveys, that the surveys were alternated, that there was no way to be able to trace back a student to their survey. So we went through all of that. The next one drives me crazy, the next bullet point, and it's one that, of course, we address all the time in prevention, and it's, won't it put the idea in their head? So that was another thing that we had to prove. We had data. We actually, Logan Reed had put together a slideshow on all of these concerns with answers, and we had data showing that no, it won't put the idea in their head. But that's one that we all have to deal with, and we're all eventually going to have to answer that question in prevention. The next one was parent phone calls. Our superintendent claimed that yearly, after it was conducted, that he would get calls from parents upset about what kind of questions we're asking their children. So that was something else that we had to address. My solution to that was to direct them to me, and I would address their questions. So what we did was, on the parent permission form, we added my contact information, and then he had my contact information, so that if a parent did end up calling and they were upset, that he could give them my number and I would address those questions. The next issue was permission forms. We would have loved to have permission forms go out at the beginning of the year in the packet that they get with all of their permission forms. But the superintendent said that because it's done so far in advance, that parents will forget what they've signed, and also that they just go through and sign paperwork, not really reading what it is. And so we couldn't put the paperwork in the beginning. And there was some other issues with the permission forms that I'll address later, that comes up with the school board meetings, and how we were able to work around that. So the other issue he had was school interruption and facility interruption. He didn't want us taking time out of the school day to conduct the survey, as well as he didn't want faculty interrupted and faculty to do the survey themselves, so administer the survey, because it takes time away. And that's completely understandable. We do know that teachers kind of get everything. They kind of get the blunt of all of the stuff to do. They get everything. So we know that they're very busy, and you know, all the time they're asked to do extra things, and he didn't want that done. And we found a way around that I'll address in just a little bit. So the principals meetings, After we had met with the superintendent, and he said, well, you also have to get permission from all the principals. So then we went to every single school in our district and met with each principal. And the important thing was that it wasn't just me going to meet with these principals. I took members of my coalition. So our chair and our vice chair went. Sometimes it was Logan Reed, sometimes it was our secretary, sometimes it was our youth. But it was always nice to have a unity, to have a few people going to show that this is important to us. The other thing we had to ensure the principals is that we would do all the work, which meant gathering all of the permission forms and scheduling everything. That was another hard thing. Last year's survey we did on the very last day of school. So that was hard. That definitely affected our numbers. And then also ensuring that we would conduct the entire survey ourselves. So teachers would not be pulled out of class. That when we did schedule, it would be during a time that everybody could do it and it wouldn't be time missed from school. The school board meetings. This was the hardest part of our whole process, was that getting approval from the school board. So we had to prove not only to the principals and the superintendent that the SHARP survey was important, but we also had to prove to the school board that the SHARP survey was important. And a lot of our school board isn't educated on prevention. And so that was another thing that was hard. We had to address that. Well, wouldn't it put the idea in their head quite a lot? And last year, we all know that 2 new questions were added to the SHARP survey. And I think that's where a lot of the issues was coming from. And there was big issues in our community with those 2 new questions. They wanted them taken out completely, which we all know wasn't a possibility. So we went through 3 months of school board meetings, which happened a month at a time. So things got put off and put off and put off, which was really hard. But I wanted to show you guys a document that we created to address all of the concerns with the school board. And here it is. So this is, and I can share this document too, like we can email it out. But what I did was I put together an informational packet. It contained the 2 new questions that were added last year that were kind of a big deal for our school board. We spent an entire school board meeting just talking about these 2 questions. So then we went ahead and we put data in and explained the 2 new questions and why that data is needed. And we even put in sources and everything for it. We talked about mental health and gender, all sorts of things, and kind of explained why those 2 questions were important. The other thing too is that they wanted a customized permission slip. And this is one thing I said I was going to talk about later, is the permission slip. They wanted parents to know exactly what we were going to be asking their children. So we took the normal parent permission form from SHARP, and then we also put in the permission form itself, we added the 2 questions so that they could see them themselves. We made sure to underline things like all responses will be completely anonymous. The other thing we did is we put in that this survey is not administered by the Kane County School District. That was one of the ways that we could get around trying to make sure parents weren't calling the school district because of this. And then we also put my contact information in there.
Ashley, is there supposed to be something up on your screen right now?
Oh, yeah.
We're not seeing anything.
Oh, okay, here. We'll see if this works. Did this work? Can you see it now?
That looks great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back over it. So this is our kind of informational packet with the 2 questions. We put them on there, the explanation of the 2 new questions. And like I said, I'll send this out so you guys can read through it, copy it, whatever you want. And then here is the permission slip example that the school board had to approve. So we put the questions in so that they could see what they were exactly. This is the underlining that it'll be anonymous. Also, we put in a link to the survey itself. which I think was important, so that parents could actually go to the survey, check out the survey, look at all of the questions so that they knew exactly what their student would be signing. Now, one thing with this permission form that we found out later that we kind of run into trouble with is that when we did this permission form and we sent it out on paper, we found that a lot of youth and adults were answering the questions. So we got the permission form signed back, but we also got where students or youth or parents or students would have answered the two questions, which was a little concerning. But there's a way around that, and I'll explain that in a minute. And then, of course, it's the generic permission form. We also included a timeline for the survey. As you can see, it was meant to be sent out on February 11th, but we had to wait for 3 school board meetings for approval. And then the most important part of this was the survey benefits. So I went through and I named every single grant that I had ever received where I mentioned the SHARP survey. I mentioned every single activity that that grant does. There was a few things I left out, some of the funding that's not really necessary, but you can understand the gist of it because there's a lot of money tied to it. The other thing I did was I found other organizations that use the SHARP survey data, and I listed every single one of those other organizations. So it wasn't just us that were going to be affected if it was not conducted. And then I went a step further and I looked at all the common concerns that needed to be addressed. So the things that they were worried about. So the validity checks and everything. And then I put our contact information and Mary with Bach Harrison's contact information on the end of the document. So every single school board member, principal, and the superintendent all got this document with everything included. All right, so can you see my slideshow again?
Yep, we can. That's all. Well, no, we don't see your slideshow. We're still seeing the document.
How about, oh, hold on.
Ashley, are you willing to share that document with us? That was fantastic.
Oh yeah, I'll send it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I tried to put it in the slideshow, but I don't know how to do that. So can you see my slideshow again?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay. So one thing that made the biggest difference out of all of this is that we had youth and adult coalition members attend all of the school board meetings with us. And the very last school board meeting where they were going to make a final decision, we had a ton of youth members show up. So the entire room was full of our youth members. And the great thing is that the school board asked those youth questions, a lot of the same questions that they had already asked us, but the youth got to answer them, which I thought was fantastic. And I think that that really is what made the difference. And I think that that's what got it approved. So once we got it approved, we had to figure out how are we going to make sure that we're getting the best out of conducting this survey. So gathering parent permission forms. We wanted to make sure that we got enough students to take the survey that it would be valid, which was difficult. If anybody's ever gathered parent permission forms, it's difficult. So what we decided to do was try to make everything electronic. And I will say that making things electronic is what saved us. So at first we used Adobe, I think it's called Adobe Sign or something like that, and it was okay. We've also tried Sign Now. I'm not finding something that I love yet. Sign Now is free, which I like, and you can upgrade. Adobe costs money. I'm not quite sure what I'll try next, because a lot of these programs you just email to one person, but I want one document that you send out to a bunch and then get the responses back. But it really did save us a ton. One thing I like about Sign Now is they have an app and you can actually text the permission form. The bad thing about Sign Now, I believe it's Sign Now, is that you have to authenticate it. So then you have to like wait for them to get an email. One of them, Adobe or Sign Now, does that. And then they have to like re-log on with their email. It's kind of annoying. But sending out the electronic permission forms was huge. Not only because when we had to get student contact information from the schools. Luckily, they were able to give us that. So we got all of the parent emails. And so we were able to send out all of those permission forms to the parent emails. Well, we know that not every parent checks their email. So we were actually able to text those parents that didn't, which also was nice. So that year we did emails, we did texts, we did snail mail to every parent. And then we used our youth coalition. So they took around permission forms to their friends, to everyone in the school, and said, your parents need to sign this. And then they would take it home and the youth would gather them, or they would turn them back into the office. So the youth didn't actually see the completed permission form, which was good because, like I said, a lot of those questions were filled out. With the electronic signatures, however, there wasn't a box where they could select an answer. So they didn't fill out those 2 questions. One thing that's key if you're going to do electronic signatures is that you have to have student contact information or be working with your schools or have your schools be willing to email out that document. And I lost my train of thought, but 2, making sure that you're obeying by like privacy laws and things like that. So that's all a lot. And in a small town, we kind of get away with a lot, but permission forms electronically really were what saved us. We got probably double the amount of feedback as we usually do. Now, because we had to wait so long for the school board to approve the survey, like I said, we conducted the survey on the very last day of school. And that was hard, but we got our principal involved and our school counselor. And that day they were checking kids out of school. So before kids could check out of school, they sent them down to us. We were like camped out in a classroom. They sent us down to us and they had to take the survey before they could check out of school. The only hard thing was that seniors had already checked out of school. So we didn't get a lot of senior survey feedback, but we still were able to get a lot more than we thought we were going to get. Actually, so conducting the survey, another deal we made was that we would conduct the survey all ourselves. So we had to schedule a time that wouldn't take out of school. Our school here does a literacy hour, which is about a half an hour, and every single student in the school does it at the same time, which is nice. So we were able to conduct the survey during literacy hour, and that way they did not miss any class. We had looked into doing it after school. We knew we would not get participation if it was done after school. We looked into incentives, and those are all things that we knew we couldn't do. So doing it during literacy hour was our best bet. We also did the electronic version of the survey, which I think saved a ton of time. In conducting it the last few years, I found that the paper surveys, and I don't know why, they take a lot longer to complete than the electronic survey. I don't know if kids are just used to being on electronic devices, but or if it takes time to fill in the bubbles, but the electronic surveys were key. So we were able to just have like a QR code, or we had a link to the actual survey. And then every student in our school has a Chromebook. So they were able to just bring their private Chromebooks and complete the survey. Another thing though, when you are doing the survey yourself and you have that many permission forms, you have to make sure that only kids that turned in permission forms are there to do the survey. And when you're doing the whole school at once, that can be kind of difficult. So we had a sign-in sheet that we marked off as students were coming in. And of course, we had our list of students that had permission forms. And I tell you, you will have students show up that are like, what's going on down here? I want to be involved. And you have to turn them away because you're like, your parent didn't sign this form. Sorry, you can't be in here. So you will have that happen. And then, like I said, we've had to do makeup surveys. The other thing that was great was our superintendent, not our superintendent, but our school counselor agreed to work with us, and people that missed the survey, he would pull in the rest of the day and have them make up the survey or do the survey. So we were able to get a few more from that. So that's kind of our story. I always say hard work pays off, but really it's bugging them until they do what you want. I found that out. And the reason why I say this is because this year, right before school started, our high school principal, and we must have bugged him way too much, because he contacted us and he said, can we please just include the permission forms in the beginning of school paperwork? And I'll tell you that I almost fell over. I did cry, because that was a huge, huge step for us. So this year we have probably half of our permission forms already gathered, which is fantastic. And so we'll just have to gather the other half, and we're going to start now so that we have plenty of time to get it done, and maybe we'll get some of our best numbers. So we're excited. So that's it. Any questions?
Ashley, thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. I know that like sometimes it's really difficult to find workarounds for things, and it's always good to hear what other people are doing for those workarounds in their own areas. So Ashley, thank you again for that. And I'm sure that Ashley's willing to take questions if you want to email her. We'll make sure that everyone is able to access that document that she created. So, and then I'm just checking the chat box to make sure I'm not missing something. Getting the Sharps on the school board conference. What a great idea. I think that's a great idea, Shannon. So, and maybe getting some of our youth involved to help present that would be really cool, because they could help the school board understand how important it is for their schools and the communities to have the Sharps data and how we use that. So playing off the presentation that Ashley did for her own school board, that would be really great. So anyway, if you have not signed the roll, make sure that you hop in. In fact, I will just pop that. Let's see. I'll pop that link in once again really quickly, and then if you want to go sign into the roll, we would appreciate that. And next month, we would really like to get some input on how everyone is doing COVID, or doing, we're all doing COVID, how everyone is doing prevention in your community, and particularly in the schools during COVID. So we'll send an email out as an invitation, and hopefully we'll get some people jumping on board with some of the workarounds that you're doing to implement your strategies in different ways. So any questions? Or I'll leave this up for a minute so that people can sign in. And thank you so much, you guys. And if you didn't see Michelle's baby, hop on her Facebook, because she's absolutely beautiful. Michelle and the baby.
Thanks, you guys. It was great.
Thank you.
I think that I can share that document straight to the chat group, so I will try that real quick.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Yeah.